Roll call.
Here.
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 Absent.
Approval and/or corrections to the agenda.
There are none.
I move we approve the agenda.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Receiving of public comment. Yes, Brandy, whose last name I'm not going to botch again, so please come forward.
Good evening. I just wanted to make a few statements about, I know that you guys are talking about fundraisers today, and there's been a lot of hubbub around the community about it. And so I just wanted to make my opinion made, as well as I know that a lot of people share the same views as I do. So one of the reasons why I voted to go for a PTA rather than a foundation is because the PTA has a lot of structural rules that you have to follow, and some of those have to specifically do with fundraising. And one of them is that you have to clearly identify who is putting on the fundraiser. And so I feel like a district policy of who is putting on a fundraiser, if it's being done, needs to be put in place, whether it's ASB, a foundation, a PTA, 8th grade science, or 8th grade class, whatever. The other thing that I really like that they do that I feel like we could implement district-wide is what the money is being raised for. So just having a blanket fundraiser for nothing seems like people are putting their money into like thin air, whereas if you have it clearly identified what it's going towards, 6th grade science camp, to the music program, for the teachers, like the turkey trot. I think that that helps parents know where their money is going. I'm not sure if that could be a policy district-wide, but something that I think could be put to practice by the schools a little bit better than it has been. The other thing that I would like to see is a certain percentage that has to be going towards the school. So some of these fundraisers that our kids get with a catalog only make like 20%, only 20% goes to the school, which to me is far too little for our kids and our teachers' time. I also have a problem with assemblies being done during the day, so our kids being taken out of instructional time to be forced to sit down to an assembly, which throws incentives at them. I was part of, I watched one of the assemblies that happened at one of my previous schools that happened last week at Wickland, and it was really slummy. And I was really embarrassed by the portrayal that it had on our kids, because I know that as a community in Mountain House and as Lammersville School District, we do not want to support that kind of atmosphere. And the last point that I wanted to make was, this is a PTA rule, and so I'm not sure it could be district-wide, but it was something that I've had a problem with, and I know other friends have too, in our district with other schools, is that the money that's being raised is not getting spent within that school year. Now, if you're raising money for a big playground like Bethany was, and it needs to carry over for a few years, that's one thing. But when someone has made $20,000 and then it's not getting used on the school year that my child was going to school there, and it wasn't being used for them, I just think that's kind of being a little bit dishonest in the process. So thank you for your time, and enjoy your evening.
Thank you. And I apologize. That I realized after she had started, so I didn't want to stop her in the middle, that should have actually been brought up when the agenda item came up, but no, my fault, not yours. Thank you. Our next speaker is Atul Khanna.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that I am running for the school board, and I was always interested in the school board. As you know, some of you know out there, I've served on the school board for 5 years. And I guess what really pushed me over the edge is some prominent people in the community actually asked me to go ahead and run for it. And I just wanted to say a few comments on why I think I'd be an effective board member. My job as a pediatrician is to listen to parents and and then get information, gather information, and then make a decision. I think that is exactly what the school board does. They have to gather information and make decisions on the best interest of for the children of our community. And my job as a pediatrician is very similar to that, so I do have a lot of experience with that. The other thing I would like to say is that people ask me, well, what are your agenda items? And, you know, I do have children in the district, but I think if I view my children's issues in the district, you're taking a very myopic view of the district. You have to gather information. I don't have any agenda items for running for the board. My job as a board member, and I'm sure most of you agree, is to get not just my own myopic view from the district, but to gather all the data and all the information and make the best decision for the district. So thank you for your time, and if you have any questions, please contact me.
Thank you. Item 6, consent items for consideration.
I'll move for approval of consent items as proposed.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 7, district administrative report, superintendent's report.
So we had a circumstance that came forward that I would call a growing pain in the 21st century, but also as an important lesson to learn about opportunities and what you have to think through when you provide technology and the instant access of information. So the circumstance that I'm reporting on this evening was there was an assignment at the high school which revolved students doing research on statistics. And the students had a number of different things they had to do, but one of the things was to send out surveys. So the way we set up the Gmail accounts was all of the access emails were in one place. So that makes sense logistically, but when you're trying to make sure that you are honoring people's children's rights, you can learn a lesson. So the lesson learned on this is that our high-achieving students discovered that they can get a lot of information back if they bulk email their surveys out to all the kids and the people included in the Gmail domain. So we've spent a little bit of time over the last week or so looking at, is there a way structurally with the technology that we can block access and make it a safer environment in terms of who gets access to whose email account? And the answer is yes. There's something called a domain. We can establish a separate domain with high school students and the like. There are some other blocks within Gmail, but the domain way is probably the most, the way we can look at it from a policy perspective. And then the other thing is we need to have a conversation with our staff in terms of, it is great to have a high school group of kids working with a group of kids from a K-8. But there would be some procedural things that would take place. One is the teacher to teacher would have to talk. If there's going to be an exchange of information between students, older students and younger students, that we would have to give the parents an opportunity to say, I want my child to participate or not. These are all structures that are very typical with controversial books or PG-13 movies and the like. But as we get into this technology age, like I said, this particular circumstance, the logistics in which we set it up, we learned a lesson on this, which is that we have to also look at when kids have access. Very creative, doing the right thing in terms of doing the assignment. We also have to think through what are the blocks to avoid having a circumstance where children are being contacted without their parents' knowledge. So we are going to bring forward a means of which a policy in terms of here's what we want to do for articulation between older students and younger students, or older classes and younger classes, and also come up with a technological way where we can assure the community that there are structures in place to block just, I've got access to this, so therefore I can use it. So it's a short report, but just simply a matter of growing pain. That's an important one to discuss and find some solutions to, which we can do technology and policy-wise.
Thank
Can I
you.
ask you a question?
Certainly.
On technology, what is the district's plan for building internet citizenship and teaching kids, all kids across the grades, you know, rules of safety when being online and all that good stuff?
So one of the things in the presentation for later is the spreadsheet that I showed. And one of the pieces in there is about the K-7, all the different experiences and all the different things we want the kids to know about technology. The answer to that would fall within, in kindergarten, they're going to learn this first, second, third, and that's where we would teach it. So it would be systematic through the grade levels along with the skills that we're teaching, and then obviously setting up our system so that it doesn't have a bump like this.
So what is our program then that we're going to present to teachers so that they can all use it and all have the same language and be on the same page?
So there's already an adopted set of grades-based technology skills and the like, but in terms of a program that's been identified, we have not identified the technology citizenship, I think you called it. We haven't identified one, so that would be the next step would be to.
I would recommend the teachers or whoever's going to make the decision look at Common Sense Media. It's free, it's online, they've got great curriculum from, I know at least K-8. I don't know if it goes beyond high school, but it's already there, it won't cost a thing.
And it's called Common Sense Media?
Common Sense Media.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? So,
No, I just think we need to, I appreciate the fact that we know there's going to be bumps. We're growing. And when we see a bump, we fix it as quickly as we possibly can. So I appreciate the immediate action.
okay, B, there have been no complaints in Williams Act. And C, which is, I'm very excited about this. We have a number of people here representing different positions in the district who are going to give us a preschool SDC program presentation. So we're going to invite our Director of Special Ed, Julie Corona, forward.
Good evening, Governing Board, Mr. President, Dr. Nicholas. Based on our improvement plan, special education improvement plan that is supported by the Governing Board Superintendent, one of the concerns in our improvement plan was and is to have the least restrictive environment continuum. So based on that, we opened our new SDC Special Day Class Preschool program. Today, we're here to bring you, to give you an update of our preschool program. I am proud to present, we have preschool team. We have a special education teacher, Angie Stevenson. Can you please stand? Not to put her on the spot. Mrs. Stevenson has been with the district for the past 6 years. She did start as a resource specialist. She was wearing multiple hats. She was also covering the preschool meetings, and she was helping with Title I. Up until this year, she is in charge of preschool, special day class preschool, and she's the teacher. She coordinates the meetings, coordinates relationships with outside agencies and the county as well. A second important member of our preschool staff is Ms. Kimmy Phillips. She is our speech pathologist that is working with special day class preschool. And last is our school psychologist, Jessica Suarez. She is part of the preschool team and also works with Wickland and Lammersville School District. So with that being said, they have presented information and update about the preschool program. So I'm going to hand this to them. Thank you.
Thank you for having us tonight. We just have a few slides.
You need to talk into the microphone.
I don't okay, sorry. Oh, great. We just have a few slides to give you an update and to let you know where we started and where we are now. I also want to recognize that two of our parents came tonight, Mrs. Vanagan and Mrs. Doe, and Sierra's here too. One of our students is here. So this year we opened an SDC preschool. I took over the program, and Kimmy's the speech therapist, and Jessica is our school psychologist, and we also have an aide. Her name is Leanne Browning. She's new to the district, and so we have a great team. We work very well together. Everybody has experience with preschool students previously too. So this is just a little slide about where we were and where we are now. So about 3 years ago, when I started to help with the preschool, we didn't really have a process at all. We didn't get very many preschool referrals. By law, the district, if we're looking to see if they're eligible for special ed, once they turn 3, it becomes the district's responsibility by law. So we had maybe 5, 10 a year, and the speech therapist would just take it, do the assessment, and decide from there what to do with the student. And in the last couple of years since I've done this, we've assessed over 45 to 50 students a year. And we have to find a placement for them if they qualify. And so that's kind of where we were and where we are now. Providers had minimal experience with preschool age students, so I don't know if you know this, but when you work with preschool age students, as a teacher, you have to have a separate credential. So I have a mild, moderate special ed credential, but I also have an early childhood special ed credential now too, because it's different for 0 to 5 years old. My bachelor's degree is also in child development, so I've had many years of preschool students, so has Kimmy. So has Jessica. Previously, a school that Kirk was principal at, I was a preschool teacher at his school. So.
Many years ago.
Yes, because we're old. Oh, maybe you are, but no. I give him a hard time about that all the time. Before had minimal experience. The providers were kind of flying by the seat of their pants. I don't know, what do we do with these preschool students? How do we assess them? Now we've got providers who have experience. We didn't offer a full continuum of service. So if you qualified for special education under the age of 5, you either got direct speech and language service from a district speech and language pathologist, or we sent you to the county, which has moderate severe programs. We didn't have anything in between. We have some students who need a little bit more than just direct service of occupational therapy or adaptive PE or speech and language, but they weren't moderate severe enough to go to a county program. But because we had to offer something and we had to give something that's comparable, we would send them to the county program. And now we have what's called an appropriate continuum of service. We offer these direct services. If they need more than that, we have this mild, moderate preschool. And then we still refer kids to the county who have more moderate, severe needs, or to non-public agencies. And of course, we're always looking at placing students in the least restrictive environment. So like I said, some students were inappropriate placed in a more restrictive environment because that's the only option we had to offer. And even though it wasn't exactly the correct placement, it's what we had that was most comparable. And we didn't have established relationships with the county, with the outside agencies, and with the regional center. So we get 90% of our referrals come from the Valley Mountain Regional Center. Students from 0 to 3, they can go through the regional center and they get services through there, and then they refer them to the district once they're almost 3 at about 2.5. And they were referring, and they were going straight to a speech therapist or somebody, and then sometimes they were getting forgotten, or somebody didn't know who was taking over the case. So we didn't have a great relationship with the county or with the regional center or with the non-public agencies because we just didn't have consistency of who was dealing with these people. So now we have one established contact, and we have established these positive relationships. And it's great also for us because when we're not sure what to do, we can call one of these agencies and they can help us and guide us also. So that's kind of where we were and where we are now. So what does our district mild moderate preschool look like? Currently, we have 14 students. We started with 10. We quickly have gone to 14, and we have a couple others that we're looking at that it could be an appropriate placement. They're 3 to 5 years old, and the next 3 things are where those kids will go next year. We have 5 that will be kindergarten eligible, 4 that are transitional kindergarten eligible for next year, and 5 that will remain in preschool. So kind of a nice balance of 3 to 5 year olds. Each of them qualifies for special ed under some qualifying condition. They have an individualized education plan. Generally, it's a mild, moderate disability with a need for more than just a direct speech service or some kind of service. The students that we feel as a team that we've decided as a team that need specialized academic instruction every day. They come from all the different homeschool sites, and we are housed at Wicklin. They have opportunities to mainstream with typically developing similar age peers at the Wickland Child Development Center. So the Wickland Child Development Center is adjacent to our classroom, and when the need is there and when a student is ready for each individual of their needs, they're able to go to that preschool classroom and mainstream with the gen ed students. And we look at that as an individual basis. They may go for half an hour a day, they may go for 1 day a week, whatever is appropriate. They may or may not go with an aide at the time in order to work on the skills that they have, that they are learning in our classroom. The class is Monday through Thursday, 8:10 to 11:10 in the morning, and direct speech and language services in the afternoon for other students who don't need the everyday specialized academic instruction. Kimmy does her direct speech services in the afternoon. In the afternoon, I go to county meetings. I follow all the preschool students who are currently placed at county or at non-public agencies, and so they have meetings about every 60 days. I follow all those students. I also do all the initials that come into the district who are referred from Valley Mountain Regional or by their parents, and we get an average of about 5 to 10 a month. Right now, we're kind of in a lull, but about 5 to 10 a month sometimes. And on Friday, we hold individualized education plan meetings and we do assessments. So when you assess a preschool student, it takes on average about 15 to 20 hours, one student, to do the entire assessment. So the team works together, and we work very well as a team, and we report together, and we do, you have to invite them to an individual, at least one individual assessment, and also see them with same age peers, because you have to see them in 2 different environments to get have a full assessment done. Cammy's going to talk about speech.
A little bit small, I apologize. As Angie mentioned, the program is very language-based. Most of the students, the large majority, have a communication challenge. So I bullet pointed the 6 different areas that challenge might be in. So when you look at speech therapy, there are many different areas that a student might have a delay. The first one, articulation. So that is if they can produce the sounds that they should be able to produce at that age. So a student that is 3 should be able to produce different sounds than a student that is 5. If they haven't met that criteria, then that would be considered a delay in articulation. Receptive language, ability to understand language, that would include following verbal directions, 1 to 2 step directions, novel directions, familiar directions. Understanding basic WH questions, so what questions, who questions, when questions, where questions. Understanding of age-appropriate concepts, so that could be spatial, under, over, next to, temporal, first and last. So these are all understanding of language. Another area that some students might have a challenge would be expressive language. So that's their ability to use their own words. Some students come in not able to speak. Some students come in speaking jargon, which is unintelligible language. So being able to develop the appropriate vocabulary, pair words together, that's the mean length of utterance. How many words can they put together in a sentence? Are they speaking in single words? Can they speak in phrases? Making verbal requests to get needs met, and that's something, of course, that's worked on all days, using your words to ask for things, not using actions, not using tantrums, but using the language that you're learning. Next one, pragmatic social language. So that's being able to use a language appropriately for interaction with peers and adults. Some of the students in the class can use their language with adults, but they need assistance to speak to other peers, to initiate conversation, to respond and initiate greetings with peers and teachers. Reciprocal interaction during play, out on the playground, and problem solving. So if there is a sharing issue or I want that, being able to use their words in an appropriate social manner to get what they need. Less common is voice. That would be deviations of quality or pitch, a hoarse voice, for example. And then fluency, disrupted flow of verbal expression, and that would be stuttering.
So here's, so we run, you'll see in a few minutes, there's a sample of our schedule, but we run, so our direct speech services are done by Kimmy pushing into the class for an hour a day, and we do centers for 15 minutes at a time with there's currently 3 or 4 groups. And so these are some pictures of kids during that center time. I let her, she organizes the centers, and she does it by their speech goals. And so during center time, they rotate through a speech center a pre-kindergarten readiness academic center with me, an art fine motor center with our aide, and then another center. We have a second aide currently right now also who works in the classroom, a cooperative play center that works on communication so they can use that pragmatic language, because 99% of our class, that's what they need help with, is how to get along with others and how to follow the routine. All those skills that also are incorporated in getting ready to go to kindergarten. So these are just some pictures of kids during direct speech language working with Kimmy. So what is the overall goal of our class? It's to mainstream these kids to gen ed kindergarten. That's early intervention is, seems to be the most successful. So here are the things we work on: school readiness, obviously, and the 5 areas of development: physical development, communication, pragmatics, cognitive development, adaptive behavior, self-help, problem-solving skills, social emotional development. We focus on, especially during our center time, we focus on individualized education plan goals and objectives. So I look at the academic goals, she looks at the speech goals, and we focus our centers around those. So like right now, I have a lot of kids that are working on fine motor, learning to write their name. So that's something we work on, matching, all those kinds of things, patterning, anything that's pre-kindergarten ready, recognizing numbers, letters. Fostering positive relationships with students and families before kindergarten. So I think this is one of the #1 things that I, as a provider and as a special ed teacher, legally, a district is responsible for a student when they qualify for special ed from the time they're 3 till they're 23. And I think if we start the relationship positively from the first moment we have them, that's going to speak numbers for the amount of years that we have to work with these families. And so if we foster these positive relationships to begin with, then that sets up a good relationship with these families. And obviously, early intervention equals greater success in school and less need for intervention, hopefully, during the elementary school years. So here are some pictures of our students working. There's a picture of Sierra with Kimmy, our student who's here tonight, in the top left corner. And it's all play-based. Our curriculum is based on the preschool learning foundation, so there are preschool standards. So we do look at those, and we base our activities in our classroom around these preschool learning standards. Currently, we've been in operation for just over 2 months. We're just learning how to get along and learning the routine and learning how to go to school and what's appropriate, not appropriate when you're with a group of people. And the communication it's been incredible to see the amount of success that we've had in such a short amount of time. We came in and the first week was like wild animals. Nobody knew how to follow a routine, didn't know how to wait your turn or ask for appropriately for something. And, these kids are now, we sit at circle time. Our center started at 7 to 8 minutes, and we were rounding them up around the room. Oh, come back, sit down at the table. We're up to 15 minutes a center. And they're all focused, and they stay at their center, and they rotate. It's the only time that it's not a choice. You have to go to your center for that hour. The rest of the day is, free choice activities, but they're all based on what their need is. So here's just a sample of what our schedule looks like. We consistently follow the same schedule every day. What we do during those times may be different, but we do follow the same consistent schedule, and we followed it from day one. And the rules and the guidelines and things in the classroom are very consistent since the moment we started. So it's a balance of free choice and teacher directed, and then we also go outside at the end too. And here we are at circle time. And there's the whole class. This was our first attempt at taking a group picture, and it did not go over swimmingly. But it is what it is. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If I could comment, having been an elementary school principal and having special ed pre-K, your caseload, thank you for all of the work that you do. You have a huge caseload. Just that needed to be acknowledged.
That's it for the superintendent's reports.
Thank you. Item 8, governing board reports.
I'm pressing the button as being instructed. Mine's less of a report and more of a request for future reports, and I had additional opportunities this last weekend to visit some of the school sites and the grounds and the conditions of the grounds, both at Bethany and Wickland, and the shape that they're in right now. And I know we just did a contract to try to address some of those things, but what I'd like to do is ask if we could to get some regular reports on plans and ideas and goals for those things, because right now, I mean, to say they're bad is probably being unfair to the word bad. I don't know what happened at Bethany. I know what happened at Wickland, and Wickland's been the same problem for years and years, and we keep attacking it in different ways. I would just like to see us try to get something going to let folks know we're addressing it. I mean, you know, it can feel like we're not doing anything when we're not talking about it, and for at least we're getting something back on a quarterly basis from somebody. Just something I would like to see. That's all.
So I had the pleasure of going to the Wickland Carnival last Saturday. I was working with some of our high schoolers who volunteered, and they were getting their community service hours. There were even a couple of Mountain House youth that are going to Tracy High Schools, and what a pleasure it was to work with these young adults. They were awesome, and they were just fabulous with the little kids that came up to play the games, and then when we got bored, they started playing the games themselves. They are teenagers. But it was a lot of fun to be out there all day, and it was especially a lot of fun to watch the principal get dunked with his mask and snorkel. So, yes, it was. He's got a good sense of humor. So a lot of fun was had by everyone, and they did a fabulous carnival, and I'm looking forward to the Lammersville Carnival on Sunday, where I think I might be sitting in the dunk tank for a little while. So, which is fine as long as it's hot out. So that's it. No? Oh, God. Thanks, David.
My pleasure. I will also be in the dunk tank, so you can spend some money and throw balls up at me when I'm in the dunk tank.
Last week I had the opportunity to go on a quick site visit at the high school and at Wickland. I went with Dr. Nicholas. We walked through with the principals at both schools, and very refreshing to see what we've talked about over the last year up here in action, and to see the computers being used at every desk in the school, and the teachers up there facilitating discussion and independent work. It was pretty amazing to see. And I do have to agree with the grounds at Wickland. As I walked around, that was one of the questions I had is, how's the campus holding up? The principal said, well, like a 10-year-old campus would. So we definitely need something to look at. And then today I attended the Crisis Response and Safety Committee meeting. And Dr. Gill, if you'll just please pass along my thanks to the group. This group comes together every month here at the district office and talks safety, and they've really embraced it. They're excited. We're moving forward, and we have some real good stuff on the way, including some training exercises for not just staff, but also for the students. So I'll be happy when that comes.
I have a quick question as a piggyback on that. Are we participating in the shakeout tomorrow?
Thank you. I forgot to mention that. We are.
Friday.
It's
When
tomorrow.
is it? It's tomorrow.
Tomorrow,
Yeah.
every campus is participating.
Great.
We talked about that today. Every campus has a plan, and I'll be making my rounds tomorrow with Dr. Gill to all the campuses to check it out.
I didn't make it to the Wickland Carnival this year. First time in many years that I didn't make it to the Wickland Carnival. I had a previous engagement with my son, and he wouldn't have been happy if we missed that to go to the carnival. But I was also, last Wednesday, I attended the Wellness Committee meeting that I sit on, and we have some exciting things coming up in the Wellness Committee activities that we're going to have at all the campuses, and I think it's a very worthwhile committee. That being said, we will move on to item 9, Governing Board Committee Reports.
Trustee Nielsen and I attended the Facility Use Committee meeting was on last week, October 6th, from 6:30, and it went until 9:30. we covered a lot of topics. We were kind of all over the map. We did have a few community folks there that provided some input. I'd like to thank staff that was there. Alvina and Jim were both there and contributed a lot. And as far as action, the only action that the committee took was based upon a request for a use of a parking lot that was going to take place before this meeting. We went ahead and approved that, and then we asked for that to come. It's on the agenda to talk about later. So that will be coming back. There was also an item from the Hurricanes with the Hurricanes asked about portable lighting, and there were two pieces to it. They wanted to use portable lighting on a couple of the K-8 campuses, and the second piece was they wanted to store it there. We told them that they would not be able to store it. That's already been addressed in the handbook, and I think that we never heard back from them. So that was going to come back tonight, but we never heard back. Other than that, it was a lot of discussion. Trustee Nielsen and I asked for a lot of data to come back before we start kind of diving into tier fee schedule and reservation policy and tiebreakers. That's kind of at the top of our list. We're going to look at our next meeting, which is Wednesday the 22nd at 6:30.
If I could, I believe that the idea behind the Hurricanes lighting was they basically said if they couldn't store it, it was a non-starter for them because it was far too expensive to rent for the day or for the afternoon. So I don't know that we'll get it to come back, but.
Item 10, action items. Item A, consider approval of provisional internship permit for certificated employee Carolyn Rodriguez, Altamont School, first grade self-contained classroom.
This is,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
go ahead. This is a PIP permit to allow this person to work while entering an internship program.
I'd like to move for approval as presented of the provisional internship permit.
Second.
Discussion?
I've read over all the documentation, and as you know, I know this kind of stuff intimately, and all the ducks are in a row, and I'm glad that we're considering these, what we call in the field, PIPs. Talking to many districts in Alameda County and a little bit into San Joaquin County, and everyone is having a problem finding fully certificated multiple subject teachers this year. So we need to be creative, and that's what this is.
Wow.
Yeah, it's full circle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item B, consider approval of new fundraiser for Mountain House High School.
This is an additional list of new fundraisers that will be coming forward for Mountain House High School.
I move we approve the list of new fundraisers for Mountain House High School.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item C, consider approval of update of facilities use handbook parking lot usage.
So I'll have the staff or the subcommittee chair just explain it, but Alvina, go ahead.
On page 55, right smack in the middle of the page is a bold underlined statement. I thought I would throw that statement out there to see if it was enough to put that in there, or if you just thought we should remove the idea that they could not even be used except if an organization was renting the facility.
Well, just stepping back a little bit, in the initial handbook, that was something that we brought forward that the board approved. And in the handbook, it said specifically parking lots would not be used. Now, that piece was something that we kind of had adopted off of Tracy, but we never really had given it much thought. Well, since then, multiple requests for parking lots have
What
come.
kinds of activities do they want the parking lots for?
Rest stops that bicyclists would like to use, Lammersville.
sure.
The parade, July 4th.
Yeah, 4th of July parade is when you use it.
And then the
staging area for
Wickland
high
Flea
school.
Market was our yard, the
The
sale
garage
that
sale,
they were
yeah.
doing.
Okay, that makes
So
sense.
just something I think that was kind of an oversight on our end that we never really gave it much thought, and now it's come back and it's kind of like, well, that makes sense. Now, initially through discussion with the Facility Use Committee, we opted not to put a fee attached to it at this time. We're going to kind of use that as, see how many we get. If it's a once in a great while thing, maybe not deal with it, but if it becomes where it's going to be an ongoing thing, I know right now, Wickland's parking lot needs to be repaved. It's time. It's been 10 years. So if we can try and get some fees coming towards that kind of stuff, maybe that's something we should look at in the future. But like I said, my thought is to review it leave it no cost at this time.
The only input I would have on this is that we need to be cautious not to rent a facility that relies on the parking lot for their use, and then go ahead and rent the parking lot to somebody else, thereby depriving the people using the multi-use room or whatever it is of a place to park.
Right, and we do have to evaluate each application as it comes in anyway. So obviously, if there's a multiple date, same location, we could.
So here's something
identify
for the
that.
committee to think about. Who gets priority? Is it the organization that is paying to rent the facility?
Yes.
Or the organization? Well,
And that's,
I'm just putting this out there.
I mean,
I think it goes without.
I agree.
that was one
I
of the
agree.
things that I had a question too. Dave brought it up. It's like, if you've got a church that's renting it on a Sunday and then you rent out the parking lot, you kind of have disrupted the use that the church might have. We're trying to make the process as clean as we can for staff. So, it might just be a function of if they're using the multipurpose room, then the parking lot is booked on that day. But if it's a small classroom or something, then I don't see why you couldn't look to get other options there. It would be a function of what we're using it for and why. Because I agree with Matt. If there's no reason to charge a fee because there's not the wear and tear like there is in a classroom. But we do have to repave, and these schools are looking at, 10 years at Wickland and 7 at
Well,
Bethany
I think we have
already.
to remember as well that if they're using the facilities parking lot, they're not to have the alcohol, tobacco, and so they should follow the same rules everybody else follows.
And we want to know who they are.
I have a question, a couple questions. So I think, as I understand, the purpose of the facilities use handbook is that the requirements for approval for use of the facilities would be clear to everyone.
Yes.
So I think that I would really rather see clear language in the handbook rather than leave it up to a board committee to make that decision.
Okay.
I wouldn't want to see the board start running administrative or, doing administrative duties. I think this kind of decision, as I understand it, was going to be made by district personnel, and the handbook was to set out those guidelines.
Correct.
So I wouldn't want to see that idea changed. So I would not want to see a board committee making a decision on individual requests. And I would definitely like to see the requirements laid out clearly for those who would like to use it. I think that's fair to them. My questions are, what about insurance requirements? What about porta potty?
They have to follow the same requirements anybody else is required to
Okay.
have.
Okay. So then, yeah, my main concern then would be putting this kind of decision in the committee's hands rather than putting it in district personnel hands.
So do we need to add some language? I mean, I don't have a problem with the sentence that's in there. Does it need to say something like the use of any facility? Because we're really treating them exactly the same as
That's true. We are.
anything, so I'm
Let's
okay with
see,
it the way it
organizational
is.
We're not adopting tonight, so I mean, we have an opportunity to come back
Yes.
and look at additional language. I mean, but I'm going to agree, that the whole point of this handbook was not to have it up to guesswork on individual sites, and to have some consistent language. What is there is brief, but to point out, to say this is what it can be used for, this is what it can't be used for. I don't think it needs to be pages and pages, but maybe a couple of sentences
Yeah.
and stuff like that.
I agree. I think maybe we ought to come back and actually make it a full section on its own and just talk about what we can and can't do, and has to follow the same application process as any other facility use.
And language in there about the parking lot, if the facilities, the buildings are being,
Used by another
not a problem.
organization.
What's
Okay.
And I'll be frank, I would like to see that section have a little bit stronger emphasis on the no alcohol, no tobacco, because most people are going to think it's the parking lot. We're not on the school, so why can't we? And I, well, because you are technically on the school. And if there's going to be a breach of that kind of a rule, that's, I think, a place we're going to see it more than anything else. So just to have some real strong language in there on something
So
like
we
that.
have 2 paragraphs down about the tobacco and/or alcohol use, saying it's prohibited at all times, including weekends and evenings, on all property owned or operated by the LUSD. And it also says in there, in the next line, vehicles parked in parking lots.
But if you just put all property, including parking lots, I mean, it doesn't need to be a whole lot of language. Just, again, most people are not going to think you mean the parking lot when you say something like that. They're going to think you mean on the grounds, inside the fences and, the parking lots. Just to avoid that complication. We may not have it, but again, if we're going to have it, that's the place I see it the most. And just to have something real solid there, I think, for us.
Yeah, I would agree. A lot of people think that parking lots don't count, even though it's there. So the more times we can repeat it, maybe more people will see it. Because I think it's mostly smokers think they can go out to the parking lot, because that's what they do at work.
And perhaps maybe something along the lines of parking lots and all outdoor areas.
I like that.
I like that.
I like that.
I apologize, I'm a bit confused. Are we approving that language, or are we tabling this?
Sounds like table.
Then we are tabling item C and moving on to 11.
I move that we tabled the item.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item C is tabled. On to 9, information and discussion items. First reading of the updated BPAR 3460 financial reports and accountability.
CSBA has some additions to this. I'll let Alvina speak to the specifics.
I think the biggest changes that I noticed were they were removing some items out of the AR and moved it to the board policy, and adding the section that we were required to do the GASB 54 statement, and so that is on page 70, and those are the additional areas that you could designate funds.
So I have a couple of questions on this. Did any of what we are seeing deviate from the CSBA sample?
No, it
Okay.
did not.
Were there any options? And, sometimes the board policies come with
Only
options.
option that there was if you already had an audit committee. We don't have a district that's large enough where we have an audit committee. I'm kind of the audit committee. I go out to the sites and ask me the question. But that was the only piece where there was keep it or toss it.
Yeah. Okay, and the other question I had was, do we need to have a sentence or some kind of language about the limit on the number of years we can have the same accounting firm? Because I know you can only renew a contract up to X number of times, and I don't remember what X is.
They didn't have that available on the CSBA. I know that there is a law on that. I guess I can double check it.
Well, if CSBA didn't have it, maybe there's a reason, but in reading it, I was surprised that didn't show up.
You're right, it didn't.
And in reading this about audits and stuff like that, so when we hire our accounting firm to do the audit, does that include the foundations?
It does not. They
does
have their
not.
own taxpayer ID.
So maybe it's a question for a different place, but I'm curious as to what our oversight responsibility is for the fiscal part of the
We now
foundations.
collect their financial reports. I collected it, I think it was around January, February, and I will regularly collect it from them. Because we have that right. If they're tied in and they're contributing funds to the school district, to a school site, we can request that information. And we have a board policy.
So we get it from them, but do we have the authority to say no on something?
I don't have an answer to that,
Okay.
but I will find it.
I don't either.
I will find the answer.
Okay.
I've been asking the same question for a long time. Can we maybe get a study session set up and get counsel in here and learn about it? Because
Be a good idea.
I've learned some information about the foundations and their financial stability and paperwork being processed that I'm surprised about, and surprised how they had that resolved. So if we could find out where the board relationship is or how we interact with that piece of it. I would appreciate it.
So our authority
No,
and
yeah.
responsibility could be, a little different, what we have to do and what we can do. To help them.
Yes.
That's
Well,
my
it's-
point.
It's to help and protect them as
Yeah,
well.
Yes.
and to protect us. I mean, again, not for
Yes.
naught, this is,
I mean, I've been involved with CSBA for a long time, and everything that I go to, that it comes up at some point in every conference, make sure you're watching over those foundations, because you hear in the media time and time again how people run off with money and mismanagement of money, and, that's just a black eye for everyone. We don't want that.
Yeah, and I don't know if I don't think foundations have as much guidance as a PTA. They have a large nationwide organization that's giving them guidance, and they have bylaws, and they go to trainings, and I don't know what the foundations have. So we need to help them out.
it should include not just the foundations and the parent-teacher organizations, but it should include the boosters organizations too, now that we're getting them, and there's a number of them that should be included in this discussion as well, because not for naught, when you hear about it, it's usually one of those two. It's either a boosters organization or a parent-teacher organization, and somebody did something. And sometimes it's intentional malicious, and sometimes just we didn't know. And I would hate for either of those things to happen. And if there's some guidance we can give to those organizations, I'm sure they'd appreciate it too, so.
Item B, group work and grading.
So I was asked to bring this forward as a discussion item about group work, meaning in class you have a number of kids, 3, 4, 5, working on a project or an assignment, and how the grading policies work. Typically, it gets more complicated as kids get older, and as you get into 6th grade through 8th grade, and then ultimately 9th through 12th grade, it gets more complicated. Every teacher has a grading policy as a starting point. That grading policy should be reviewed by site administration. That's typical practice. But then the question is so how do the kids get graded? And Ben and I had a conversation, Principal Faubert and I had a conversation about that in the policies at our high school. And I think he has a real good direction on that, and I'll speak to it, and if you have more to add, which is every student has to demonstrate a level of mastery on a specific identified set of standards. So the students can work in a group project, there can be a group grade, but ultimately each individual student needs to be able to demonstrate mastery on the standards that are identified in the project or the assignment or the inquiry. So as a general, just doing a little background in terms of how we're doing things in particular at the high school, that's a starting point for the discussion, which is students need to demonstrate mastery, and they can work in a group to do that.
So this was a concern because I was talking to a parent from another district, and his 8th grade student, who's very hardworking, high achiever, had a group project in which typically happens, half of the group worked really hard and the other half didn't. And the teacher assigned a group grade the same for all, regardless of what each student had actually done. And I hesitate to say the word Common Core because I think people are really reactionary about it, but I know that one of the big emphasis of Common Core is group work and collaboration, which I think is a very healthy skill. But I don't want to see our high-achieving students who are invested in the process being penalized for the lack of commitment of the other students. And this particular teacher's rationale to the parent was, well, that your student can help teach another student. And which may be true to some degree, but that student's not going to change, 8 years of schooling history for another kid. And I would hate to see us allow grading of that sort where, one child is being held accountable for, the life history and work habits of another, because a peer is not going to change that. So that's where I'm coming from. I think probably most administrators, if they're the ones making the decision, will come at that from a reasonable standpoint. But I think it should be something that teachers are talking about and come to some sort of consensus on. I don't know if it means that we need a board policy or if it just becomes part of an overall grading policy, or, I'm not sure how that should look, but I don't want to, a couple years down the road have to be in that situation where, my child is getting a grade that's, based in any way on another child's work.
And I would assume that teachers that plan on group work would be addressing how they do the grading on that during back-to-school night. That's the appropriate time to educate the parents on that, and then questions can come up before the grade is given. So there's a responsibility on the parents to go to back-to-school night and hear the policy or get the information from the teacher before there's a problem. Because I have heard things like that before from other places, not here in Lammersville.
So, yeah, and I think this is one of those times where if we see a pit in the road, we can maybe steer ourselves clear of it. So I'm not sure what the appropriate venue for that discussion would be or who should have that discussion, but I think it is important.
We have a perfect venue, administrator forum, where all the district and site administrators meet and talk about issues. This would be a very fruitful conversation topic. How do we do, what's our consistency? How do we set expectations for group work?
Thank you.
I'd love to hear the, the feedback from that.
I just want to say, I want to be careful we're not going into the classroom and starting to tell teachers how to do things. I'm not sure this is a district policy setting discussion. And so I agree that it's, I mean, we've all worked group projects. We've all had group projects. We all know what the typical outcome is. 2 or 3 out of the 4 are going to do the work and one's going to skate by and everyone's going to get the same grade. I just don't want to see us, it's a slippery slope to me to start interfering with what happens too much in the classroom. And when you start getting into policies that start getting to the minutia of things, I don't want to be, if this is kind of something that other districts do, then I'd like to see what those policies are and stuff like that. But I don't want to start getting into the classrooms and interfering with teacher authority. It's not, I don't see that as our role.
Typically, at least in the multiple districts that I've worked in, there's a laissez-faire process and people pick and choose their own way of doing it. And when you have problems, it's because of an unclear. So really what I think in the policy side of it, it would be the expectations is the grading and the way things are going to be graded is clearly identified. Those are things that we can ask people to do.
And consistently applied throughout the district. Those are the only 2 things I would see. As long as, you know, how group projects are graded in 8th grade, or the 8th grade group project is the 8th grade group project scores across the board. That's what I'd like
And that's
to see.
where rubrics came from, really. I mean, it was the way to, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But it,
No, I would agree with you that authority needs to be left with the teachers. We don't want to get into what they're doing in the classroom. They're working with their principals. They're showing their principals what their grading policies are and how they're assigning work, and the principals are giving them feedback based on their experiences. So, yes, I would agree. This is not a board policy thing. This is definitely something that needs to stay in the classroom.
I agree, but at the same time, I also think that if it can be passed on to the administrative forum, that we're interested.
Oh, absolutely,
We're interested in it.
report, yeah.
We want to see.
Yeah.
And as far as your comment about, I mean, I've had group grades and group projects and had the same experience in school, but it's also a life lesson because when in the working world, boy, it's the same thing there. So that needs to be taken into consideration also.
And I agree that that it's a teacher decision, but I think with guidance and oversight of the site administrators, because my daughter, who goes to a high school that isn't ours currently, had a group project in math, and when it came time for the grades, the math teacher said, each group is going to decide which student gets which grade. There's an A, a B, a C, a D, and an F in every group, and you guys decide. Well,
Somebody has to fail?
and my daughter was getting an A, so the rest of the group thought, well, you can stand an F, we can't. So they wanted to give her the F. Well, that matter was brought up with the teacher, and it was fixed. But I just want to make sure that we don't have those kinds of things
my goodness.
happening in
I
at our
think,
campuses.
yeah. Once a decision is made and everybody's on the same page, then, like you said, clear communication and consistency will take care of it. But we don't want, Lord of the Flies happening in that.
Exactly.
and just to review the starting point, at the high school, the expectation at the high school is that a group project is met with a group grade possibly, but also each student has to demonstrate mastery on the identified standards in the project. So
And I would
we've
say-
set the expectation from the beginning right. That doesn't mean that there doesn't need monitoring.
And I think with the curriculum and the structure that we have using the the Googleplex, you're going to have a better opportunity to see what each kid actually did, because all that stuff is traceable. So it's not like you all gave your handwriting notes to one person and they typed up something. The teacher can see, because you've got the drives that each student is working within, so that it's, I think, maybe something further, the K-8 section that might be of a bigger concern. And I think another bonus to the way we're working in the high school is there's way more opportunity to look at individualized performance on group projects with the curriculum and structure we have.
Item C, character counts program.
There was a discussion that was begun and a request to have a discussion here in open session in terms of the character counts program and whether or not what to do with it if there's another program out there to take a look at.
So the question was, should we limit the foundation's ability to purchase additional program or support for character ed if they choose to do so? It's not, the idea is not to replace what everyone has, to begin with at the different sites. But again, my question is, should we limit that if the foundation chooses to raise funds for something like that?
I think a deeper question on that, because we don't want to micromanage what foundations spend their money on, but do we have a need for additional character education? Have we identified that there's a problem in this area?
I don't know that there is now, but I could see it coming up. It kind of depends on your group of parents, I think. And again, it's not meant to.
Parents.
Well, that's who's running the foundation.
Right, but I would hope that the foundation would be talking to the principal about the needs.
Well, of course, but if
Yeah.
say a group of parents at the school is thinking that we need something more, are we going to allow them to work toward that? Or are we going to say they can't?
I'm going to say, from my perspective, it's not so much on what the foundations can or can't do. Character ed is a part of our curriculum. That curriculum is decided by this body. And to have parents come in and tell us they want additional stuff, they have a venue for that right here. They can come in and say, we don't like the program, we want other options. The foundations can come in and talk to us and say they want other options. No one on this board is so stuck on any program that we have that we're going to say no and not look and entertain other options. The whole point to character education is to have a consistent district-based plan and idea and structure, because we're feeding into the same place in the end. They're all going to end up at our high school. And if we're coming with different perspectives on how we deal with interventions and how we deal with bullying and all that stuff, we're trying to integrate into one place. I'd rather see us be consistent with this curriculum as we are with all of our curriculums, that they're adopted district-wide, and if the folks want changes to it, that's what we're here for, to talk about it and to listen. But I don't think that's talking about controlling what the foundations want to do. It's about controlling what we want our teachers to be teaching.
I don't think we can leave it up to the foundations to be purchasing curriculum. I think that's our job.
Well,
So-
and this is something that back when we were on the elementary board, we had this discussion. We had a different character education program in one school, a different in another, and we decided to make it one consistent program through all sites. And the reasoning for that was we didn't want one site to say, well, how come they get that and we have this? We want a consistency. And I just see the same thing happening. If we let the foundations bring that to another campus, the same thing's going to, is going to happen. They're going to say, well, how come they have that and we don't? I think it's going to cause more harm than good, at least from a governance perspective.
So then my other question is, do we exercise that kind of control when it comes to supplemental experiences? Because that's what we're talking about here, is a supplemental experience, not a replacement, but a supplemental. Are we exercising that kind of authority or limit on them for things like science assemblies or demonstrations that they want to bring into the school that would be paid for through foundation fundraising?
No, because it's not curriculum.
Science is not curriculum?
No. A science assembly is not curriculum.
And it has
to be tied
to the existing curriculum.
Right.
Well, I think that if they chose an assembly, it probably would be tied to whatever's being taught. It probably wouldn't be something outside that.
As opposed to a different curriculum that's coming and saying,
Not as
and
a
that's,
replacement for.
I still see it as you're looking to, you're not, I don't see that as supplementing. It's saying, you know, here's your Harcourt Brace book, and now we're going to go on to Houghton Mifflin, and we're going to give them that book in addition to these other books. Now you've got teachers teaching out of 2 books. Now, again, that's not the same curriculum, but it's the same concept. You've got our existing character education curriculum. If we supplement that with a completely different curriculum, what are we teaching from? And how can we ensure that they're actually teaching from the curriculum we bought and paid for and want them to be teaching from? It's not to limit options, because if there's a better option out there, I'll vote for it. I'm all for it. But we can't get to the point where 5 different schools have 5 different supplements that they're doing, and now we don't know which one they're teaching and which program and process we're following. I'd rather it be consistent, and if the foundations want to do those things, to talk about changing, to please bring that to this body, which is where it belongs.
So then are we saying that if a foundation wants to bring in supplemental experiences like a science assembly or an art teacher or something like that, that we should have that at every site before we would think that that was acceptable?
I don't see that as acceptable.
I think if the character counts program isn't working, we should look at something else district-wide. If it's working at all the campuses but for one, then maybe we should look at how it's not working at that campus and address that issue.
Yeah, and I think that my point is not being understood. Again, I'm not asking about programs to replace. I'm talking about programs to enhance what's offered in the classroom. And it seems like we're thinking that it's going to be 5 different programs if we allow that. That's not what I was envisioning at all.
To supplement the way they want to, you could end up with 5 different supplements.
On top of, though, character counts being the backbone, like your HM textbook perhaps is a backbone. Wouldn't we allow different sites to choose core lit sets perhaps? That wouldn't have to be the same at every campus.
But then character counts would be the place to go to get those additions. That's just the way I'm seeing it, is you're not just supplementing, you're adding a second piece. You're creating a second set of curriculum. That's the way I see it.
We add to curriculum and do supplemental curriculum to fill needs. I have not heard that we have a need for additional character education programs.
So that wasn't really the question either. I'm asking if that came up, what would our stance be? Are we placing limits on what the foundations can purchase as supplements if they correspond to the curriculum?
I think that if that does come up, we'll discuss it at that time with input from the person that brings it up as far as why they want it, what they think is lacking, and that sort of thing. Because I don't know that we can start making decisions based on what ifs. Yes.
Thank you.
Ms. Hendricks.
Okay, there's actually a couple of things. I'm just waiting for you to talk about them before I actually want my comments. But since one of the things came up, I have a comment for. Examples of the type of programs you might be talking about could be anti-bullying assembly, or Red Ribbon Week, making good goals, and being a good person. Is that the kind of thing you're talking about? Yeah. So right. And the only reason I know this is there's a parent at another school that's not my site that was asking for input on that kind of stuff because they've got some money coming into their parent foundation, and they wanted some ideas on fun assembly type things that they could pay for to bring into the school because they've got to use that money up this year. And so they want some good ideas on what to spend it on. And so some of those things are, we don't really have a good anti-bullying program at all in our entire district. And character counts only go so far. We are celebrating the attributes, the pillars that make us good, solid citizens in Mountain House, but we're not really having anti-bullying education. That is a big hole that we have, and bullying is a problem. And so I would say if somebody wanted to bring that to my school, awesome, do that. The point you brought up earlier regarding cyber safety, that we have an adopted set of rules and guidelines per grade level for internet safety, new to me. I didn't know that I'm supposed to be imparting to my students. I didn't know that either. We used to have an annual assembly that was covering internet safety topics, and it's come and gone. That is a hole that's in our education and curriculum. So those would be examples of things that if you were to make a recommended list of, say, the school board supports extracurriculars that cover these topics, or we endorse these types of organizations, if you want to pick from these, and that way everybody maybe has the same list of ideas to choose from, but we do have a couple of holes. So I'll save the rest of my comments for the other items here, but those are some examples, I think, of what you were talking about.
Okay, if I may. I think the things that you mentioned, those are one-shot deals. And I don't think anyone on this board has a problem with a one-shot deal on anti-bullying. That supplements the curriculum that we have. This is purchasing additional curriculum. And do we need to take the time out of the classroom to be doing two different curriculums that are aligned?
I would say we already don't have enough time to teach what we have.
That's where I was going. That's exactly where I was going. Thank you.
Item D, SRO update.
So we've been working with the Sheriff's Department on their generous support of SROs for Mountain House High School and our K-8 programs. They called this week, and there's an important conversation that needs to be started here with the board. They're writing a grant that will help fund the position from the sheriff's commitments. And they asked us a specific question about, would the district board support a policy in which drug dogs were part of the support coming from the sheriff and the SRO? So I wanted to bring that forward to start a conversation. It's not an action item, it's a conversation discussion starter, drug dogs.
And if I can start quickly, I brought this up today with the safety committee, which was comprised of all administrators and teachers, and overwhelmingly, yes. I was taken back by it. I was concerned. I don't know. I didn't know what to expect, but overwhelmingly, they said they would support it. And a few people said they had that in prior districts, and it's very useful, and they support it fully. So.
And there are sample board policies out there.
Absolutely.
We did this in one of my previous districts.
There's two pieces to this for me. There's my feeling and then what I know other people are going to talk about. Personally, I've never had a problems with drug dogs or searches of lockers. It's our property, it's our schools, it's our responsibility for their safety, and that's kind of where I personally stand on it. But if we're going to go this direction and we need to get an answer, I'd rather it not be a quick discussion with this group. I'd rather get an opportunity to hear from the public on their position on it. You know, I look at this kind of like I do school uniforms. I hate the idea of school uniforms, and I think it's a ridiculous concept. But if 90% of the parents in this community wanted it, well then I got to listen to what the people who I'm supposed to be working for and you know, voted for me somehow, to what they want and what their needs are. And I would like to get some feedback from them. I kind of think it's probably not going to be as overwhelmingly negative as some people would think, especially in the current environment, but I'd rather that be a big part of this, that we don't just do a one hit on this, that we get a lot of opportunity for the public to provide comments, whether that's a meeting, whether by email, whether a survey, something, just to make sure we're getting it out there that this is what we're considering, because I'd like the feedback.
Am I correct in thinking that the dogs would also be able to sniff for explosives and that sort of material?
You want to talk about that? Just depends on the training, I believe.
Last year, I think it was just before Mr. Hansen retired, there was a 3-year San Joaquin County Consortium that was established, and we are a member of that. So we still have 2 years of the explosive device dog sniffer.
Okay, so these particular dogs, though.
Usually the dogs
not-
don't have dual training like that. It's usually one or the other.
Okay.
So we do have, yes.
We already have an explosive dog on call anytime we want it. We have that contract. We've renewed it several times, I believe. We've had it for a long time.
We had it a long time, and then we had discontinued it, and then before Mr. Hansen retired, he reestablished it, with knowing the high school was coming on board soon.
But it's also different from having a dog on campus 24/7, which is, or any time. That's not what we're talking about here. Do I misunderstand that then?
So let me explain it. It would be like a random thing. So there would be a day where it would show up.
Okay.
There would be a random selection of classrooms. The students would be asked to leave the classroom. The dog sniffs the backpacks. If it triggers, the backpack's removed, the child goes, and local parentis kicks in, and the things go the way it goes.
I misunderstood that. I assumed that was, they wanted the dog with the SRO on campus.
Typically, the pros and cons, they can trigger on a seed, or they can trigger sometimes on medication, but it is a deterrent. You can speak more to it. So you have to go through those things, but that's what it would be. It would be a random. Yeah.
And this would be an adoption of a board policy, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so there would be ample time for the public to give us input on it. My experience with this, having worked on a policy in a previous district, the pushback that we will hear will be about privacy rights and, how can I say this? Parents who are in denial that we could have drugs in Mountain House. We have drugs in Mountain House.
Yes.
There are drugs everywhere. So, and, yeah, thank you. So, yeah, I fully support the idea and working on a board policy.
As do I. Item E, fundraisers.
So I was also asked to bring this forward. There are different types of fundraisers, and there is a particular type of fundraiser that's created a frustration and a concern out in our school communities and our parent community in terms of the hard sell, reward-based fundraiser versus your typical cookie dough sell and the like. So I wanted to bring this forward and seek direction from the board in terms of this particular topic.
Being in education for 34 years, and 34 years of fundraisers, kids like the prizes. They're worthless. It's pulling the kids out of the classroom for an assembly that they get all excited about. I don't think these are the best kind of fundraisers by any means. I'd rather see a turkey trot where the school gets 100% of the money, but you can't do enough of those to give the schools, to help to raise the funds that they need. I know there's a lot of ideas out there, and I think we need to solicit ideas from our community. They're not great, and like our speaker said, many of them we only get 20%. But to have one of those once in a while, I'm not opposed to, because the kids like the silly little prizes, and it's the same thing with Girl Scout cookies. They don't get much money from there either, but we love them. I'm kind of torn over it. I don't think a one-shot assembly for a half an hour is that big a deal. Unless there's 6 of them going on during the year, that's different. But once in a while.
Educational minutes are far too precious. I swore we talked about this right after I got back on the board a year ago, and we said we didn't want to see these assembly-based ones anymore. And more importantly, I thought we were going to be told when they were going to occur. Now, maybe I recall the conversation wrong, but the feedback I got at the last one was parents don't want this. Most teachers don't want it, because we had teachers in the audience talking about how hard it was to calm them back down afterwards and get back. It's not just the 30 minutes, and I'm sure you experienced it too when you were there. We just had a teacher say she doesn't have enough time in the day to teach what she teaches. I'd like to teach what we teach and not teach kids how to sell. They can go get a job at Amway. Does that even exist anymore? Am I aging myself
I don't
there?
know.
You're
No,
exactly right.
I don't want to see it anymore.
You're exactly right. I asked about this. I know this is a conversation that this board had. It was during a board meeting, and the result was this is why we get the fundraisers in our packets now, which they're lacking. They don't tell us the information we need to know. Is what we're looking for is are they these kinds of fundraisers? And these kinds of fundraisers, not only we've heard time and time again from teachers and staff that it's painful, but the consternation that it causes in the community is unbearable. And the emails that I received over Wickland in the last couple weeks is unbearable. So I don't think we can continue to have them.
And I think, like, as Matt said, I think we need more information when we are presented with the lists of fundraisers as far as what the fundraiser is exactly and how it's run and those types of things. I think we need to be very careful when we make decisions based on broad parameters. Someone mentioned we should ban them if we get less than a certain percentage. Well, foundations get a lot from dinner nights where they get maybe 10% of the take at Chili's or Wild Wings or wherever it is, but they do nothing. They hand out flyers, and people show up and eat with a flyer, and the foundation may get a check for $100 or $200 or whatever it is, but it's almost like free money. And we need to be careful that we don't ban good things in an attempt to get rid of things we don't like.
So I think we have a structure currently that I'm looking at what we just approved tonight for Mountain House High School. And if we just push that everything that comes to the board follows this, because this isn't the assembly issue. This is what the money is for. So what we have for Mountain House High School, there's a jogathon, and it's sponsored by the PTSA. And to benefit the fund, crystal clear, I had no questions when I read this. When is it? And what's the email address of someone that we can ask questions? This is, if we got this for every single fundraiser, and maybe another column that would help us to see if there's anything extra. Is this an assembly? What are...
Will instruction time be used?
Yeah.
I think that's what it comes down to.
And even though I spoke in favor of it once in a while, if the board wanted to ban them, I would support it. So.
My feeling is the hard sell ones, it causes too much grief.
I'd also like to find out, even though they only get 20 or 30% sometimes, how much money are they raising on those in comparison to twice a month, Mountain House Boosters will advertise the cupcake ladies coming, okay, or the jogathon. What are they getting? Are the hard sell ones earning so much money that it would be a detriment to the school to ban them? I don't know what the results of these fundraisers are.
I think that's a very fair question.
Yeah.
It is.
How much are we getting from them?
$10,000
Yeah.
out of it, maybe it's worth the 30 minutes of our kids' time. If we're getting $300 out of it, then
Exactly.
we're not.
Exactly.
And I do think that's a
Yeah.
fair question. So.
She wants to know if she can come back up.
Please don't speak from the, if you'd like to come up to the podium, you can come up. I just didn't want to break into any of the board members.
You had five items there that I was best to address separately instead of all at once. So a couple of things have been mentioned tonight about the Big Bad Wickland fundraiser. And so what I'd like to do is take a moment to stand up for myself as the person who took over ASB from somebody who did it for 10 years. Receiving this job 3 weeks into the school year when nobody else wanted to do it because of stuff like this. And nobody was going to do ASB at our school. And so I said, sure, I'll take it. With a deadline from the school board to submit fundraisers, because we can only submit once a year. And so not knowing what that money was going to have to go for, because I didn't have a lot to go off of, I have to err on the side of put in your one-time request to have a fundraiser, not knowing how it works, but knowing that there's probably programs that need that money, and then come up against the program needing money, and oops, we didn't do the fundraiser, so just too bad. I dislike the high-pressure fundraiser myself, but I didn't know that I had an option this year, seeing as we'd done it for so many years, and I wasn't part of the feedback of thou shalt not have the assembly fundraiser, and our 2 new administrators didn't know either. So that's just a little bit of feedback I have. Regarding the deadline for submitting fundraisers, That's rough when the school year is first getting started. And knowing that Mountain House got to submit a second time, I would have loved that. I would have loved to have more time to look at all of the things that are required of ASB that there is no funding for, and we have to find money to pay for all these programs. Being the ASB director, getting $750 for the year, which breaks down to about $3 extra a day in my pay. I appreciate the fact that you would like us to be able to do fundraisers. I don't want to pressure little kids either, and hopefully next year another option can be found. But I want to set the record straight that the fundraiser brings back between 37 and 40% return. If it wasn't that number, I wouldn't have okayed it. And I believe last year we made between $3,500 and $4,000 with the catalog fundraiser. I'm still going over the numbers with that vendor to make sure that that's exactly what it is, because I knew I was going to come and talk today. But these decisions aren't made lightly, and they're made by teachers like me who have many other things to do, and we're not here to steal from children. Thank you.
So do you have any idea how much was raised in previous years at Wickland, like on a jogathon where they're not selling anything? So we can put it in perspective.
I don't have the number for the jogathon. I'm actually, because we have our situation with our school secretary that's in charge of the ASB money, I just got them to pull a report for me to show what came in and what went out, and I'm sorting through all that right now to figure out what came in and what went out. So I know for myself, but also to maybe leave it better than I found it, so that somebody isn't in my same shoes next time to say, what do we really need that money for? I had a terrible concern that if I didn't participate in the fundraiser, something would come up that ASB was being counted on to pay for it. And then they would say, it was her fault. She's the advisor. She didn't do the fundraiser. And it was erring on the side of, I'm sorry, this is kind of ugly. We have to go to a little assembly. I did try to strong arm the vendor to make sure that her prize levels were low enough that more people could win stuff instead of the lofty prize that nobody ever seems to be able to win. So I did push to say, if you're going to offer prizes, make it low enough so that people could get things. I would love for everybody to fundraise on the altruistic notion of just supporting the school, but some people will do it for the tchotchkes. And so it's hard to decipher which group is which. Are you the altruistic group that's just going to do it because you want to do it? Don't come to the assembly. If you want tchotchkes, come to the assembly. So I tried to tell this person, please, let's ramp down the pressure and keep it the way it is. I did give that feedback because I know how much people hate it. Mm-hmm. But once the baby's out, it's happening. Yeah. And so I agree. If I could find another fundraiser that wasn't like that, absolutely I would. But for this year, I didn't really have an option.
Thank you for taking
it's just get the money coming in, so whatever programs need the money, have the money. But feedback for the board is I would probably like some more time or an option to submit maybe twice a year, where you get the chance to really look at what your need is and then say, oh, we're going to have a little hole here. Maybe we need to have a fundraiser or be able to network better with our parent foundation. Maybe be able to network better with our parent foundation to say, you know what, we thought we were going to have enough money. Can we do a request from the parent foundation to supplement the ASB budget? I just know that there's lots of things that need paid for, and these fundraisers, all I did was pull last year's report that was submitted to the board and resubmitted it. So it's exactly the same. And as far as the identifying of who's doing what fundraiser, it's in the school board minutes. It's public record. And so I also represent CJSF, 8th grade, 7th grade, you name it, I'm probably running it. So I appreciate your time and your consideration. The only feedback I have for the board is if we had more time or the opportunities to submit more than once a year, that would give us a chance to reflect on our efforts. And anybody who's a new ASB director might have an opportunity to get all their wits about them before they just submit something because there's a deadline and they have to and they don't want to be told no. Happy to report that our ASB is up to, I think, from I don't know, 15 participants to about 50 students. And so ASB is alive and well at Wickland. Thank you.
Thank you for taking this on.
I don't want this to devolve into a conversation or back and forth because that's not really what this is supposed to be, but you need to know something very important. No one of this board said the word blame. Not at all. No, I'm not. You said you felt blame, and I want to make sure you understand that. You know me, and you know my daughter. No, this can't devolve into a conversation. This is not.
I'm not blaming the board.
No, but you said.
I feel an extreme responsibility from the parents and the community who maybe are not 100% aware of the situation at their school. And I want them to know from my heart that I'm not about torturing their kids with an assembly.
And that's what I'm talking about,
blame.
blame. So I want to wrap this up, but as far as your portion, but this is, no one here blamed you. No one here blamed any staff member. We weren't talking about that.
Absolutely.
What we're talking about is a response to a public, and we can't do this. I'm just going to respond, say what I need to say, and that's how this has to be.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We never said blame, and this isn't about that. This is about a response to a public outreach that many of the board members got over this concern. And we need the info. Oh, I got a lot more than 3. And it's also a response to the fact that we did discuss this last year when they did it, and many of us weren't happy about it. But I will just say that you're right that we need more information, and we need to provide to the parents, this raised $4,000. Are you happy with that, yes or no? Because that might change their minds. So, that's, and like I say, I don't want it to devolve into a conversation that's.
And I want to thank you for what you do. I know that it's, first off, Wickland's in a rebuilding year, like many sports teams. Rebuilding, I get it. And you had big boots to fill. I know that Anna did a lot of stuff for a lot of years, so I appreciate you stepping up when no one else would, and I appreciate everything you're doing. This might be an isolated incident, an oversight, and that's fine. But we had a responsibility to talk about it because we've been contacted by our constituents, and that's what we have to do. As far as, it might be a bigger discussion because we had a huge board meeting about this last time, and several teachers were against it, and they said that it wasn't worth the gain. So I don't know, maybe it's time to revisit the whole thing. As far as the only being able to submit once a year, is that the policy? I didn't know that was the policy.
There was an initial deadline, though.
There's an initial deadline, but we have broken, if that's the policy, we've broken it because we immediately came out of the deadline we wanted an update and more clarification, and then with the high school rolling out. So I don't think that there is a policy. I'm not aware of that. I think there was a deadline.
I think there's just an initial one.
Correct.
And then we do take supplements.
I think we need to maybe, clarify the policy, and I know from our discussion from before, we just wanted to know before they were going to happen. We want to know about them, what it's for, where the money goes. So
I thought we got one like every month from somebody.
So maybe we just need to clarify that and kind of.
Right, and so if you're new, you're going to hear things. I mean, people are going to tell you, well, this is what you have to do, and this is how you do it, and this is the policy. But that doesn't necessarily mean it was accurate because we immediately came back and went out to all the schools the week after and said, you need to clarify, make sure you've got all your fundraisers on there. So clearly there's some things we need to tighten up on this whole thing.
I appreciate that acknowledgement of Wickland being in a transition year. That's also true for Cuesta and Altamont. The staff that took on those responsibilities are not there anymore. So I think we should allow all those campuses with big upheavals the latitude that we did not allow last year when one error was made. I appreciate that.
Well, I think with this stuff, we need to continue to be flexible because it's forever changing. And I think that my experience with this board especially is that this board's very flexible when it comes to things like this and revisiting items that don't make sense.
And again, a good opportunity for reflection on how we handle it when our staff are outside of those rules that we're now trying to implement.
Anyway, I don't think anybody on this board wants any of our foundations or PTAs to miss out on a fundraising possibility because they missed a deadline. From my perspective, if somebody wants to come to us and say, next month, we would like to do da-da-da as a fundraiser, I don't think anybody has an issue with hearing that. Next speaker card, Ben Faubert.
So I know I only have 3 minutes, so I'll make
quick.
it brief. I come with lots of different hats that I've worn, and knowledge of, firsthand knowledge from a board perspective, from a parent perspective, from a participant in a school foundation, and now a PTA perspective, and now as an administrator. And I just, I appreciate the conversation that's going on with the board. I think it's very important to know that in public education, it's very important that ASB and school foundations, and now at the high school with all of the clubs, that and every year we will have clubs that establish themselves in the middle of a year, that I'm hearing that the board is saying that you don't mind receiving fundraising, not just once a year, but that, if a new club forms next month and they want to, put some stuff forward, that's acceptable. So I think that as well, as a parent, having had our kids come home, and as a family, from the parent perspective, our kids won't participate in those fundraisers. When and if that kind of fundraiser comes around, we will send our kids to school with $100, because we know that the $100 will all go to the school. We don't want Great American Opportunities to have any of our money. I don't need their chocolate. I don't need their toys. It's nasty anyway. But some families will not do that, and I think that what we really need to be careful with from a parent perspective is the message that we send when our teachers are rushing to get content, that using school time to make a high-pressure presentation from a parent perspective is not something that I appreciate. And I know that a lot of the people that I know in the community don't appreciate the high pressure. I also agree with talking about we don't want to maybe limit it to a percentage thing, because some things may make money, like the dinner nights and things like that. So I think overall, looking at the current policy and maybe adding another column to explain what's going on, and we'll just make those that are presenting fundraisers think, oh yeah, after all, these people who we're working with to raise funds are salespeople. And they will say and do anything that they need to make their cut of what they get off of our kids. And I want to make sure that we protect our kids and our instructional time from those kinds of activities. That's all I say.
Thank you.
Wow.
That's 2 times that's happened now.
Although Brandy has already spoken on this, I inadvertently had her speak at the wrong time, so if she would like to come up and make a brief statement at this time.
Okay, so you had asked about a catalog fundraiser versus like a turkey trot. Since we started our foundation or PTA at Altamont, we had looked at that, and so I don't want to be totally quoted on this, but I believe that Cuesta, the QSF last year on their mixed bag fundraiser made somewhere between $4,000 and $5,000, and then on their turkey trot they made I think like $12,000 or $13,000. So something like the turkey trot or the fun run always brings in a ton of money because parents know exactly that it's going exactly into their classroom. So I feel like that's not a fair comparison, because typically parents will always give more to the turkey trot or whatever when it's going directly into the classroom. So, but I do believe they make a decent amount of money, $4,000 to $5,000 for not doing anything. I'm not a fan of them, but it would probably ding some of the foundations. On another note is when I made a comment about having it labeled, the fundraiser needs to be labeled on who's putting it on. I want to stand by that because as a parent, I cannot tell you how many times last year I got a catalog come home with my kid and I had no idea if this was QSF, If this was ASB, all you have to do is stick a letter on it and says ASB. You don't even have to say what you're raising it for, because I totally understand. You don't always know what you're going to need money for. But I should know who is putting on this fundraiser, whether it's ASB or QSF or whoever. And then the other comment that I have in regards to ASB is ASB does not have, I don't feel like they don't have the support that foundations and PTAs have. We can run a big turkey trot, no big deal. We can do a big carnival. I don't really think that ASB can run something like the carnival on their own. It's easier for the foundations and the PTAs to run huge fundraisers like that. The PTA this year took over for the turkey trot that typically the ASB does, at least at our previous school. And the ASB teacher was like, you have no idea how much time you have saved me, time that I am taking away from my family and instruction by not having to plan this fundraiser. And we structured it the exact same way they did the year before. We still gave all the money to the teachers. And I feel like our ASB teachers or ASB, the ones who are over that, are really being drained. They have no money, and they don't have the same reach out and opportunities that we do as a PTA or a foundation. I'm not sure that's anything that you guys can do, but maybe if you are going to do some kind of training or support thing, then we can emphasize that maybe the PTAs and foundations need to give a lot more support to ASB, and because they cannot do it alone. Our teachers should not be having to feel overwhelmed like this about trying to get money for our schools. So thank you.
Thank you. Another good timing.
Taking lessons from Ben.
Corey Strock. See if you can keep it under 3 minutes, huh?
Honestly, everyone stole most of my thunder, so it's fine. I just want to say that on the fundraiser issue, you guys brought up a good point in that what would be important is knowing how much an individual fundraiser makes. If a catalog sale makes $5,000, we need a way to replace that. But if a catalog sale makes $500, maybe we just don't need to do that at all. I know I've emailed a couple of the ASB directors, and I know that they're working very hard, and I certainly don't place any blame on any of them, asking for those numbers, and they don't have them yet, which may very well be due to turnover. I don't really know. But you brought that idea up yourselves, and I think if we can get those numbers out, that would help make fundraising decisions easier. I think that's all I have, so I have 2 minutes left.
Thank you. Moving on to item 12, study session, measurables and initiative-based data.
Okay, so first of all, I want to thank the huge crowd that showed up tonight for some data talk. Got a large audience. What I wanted to do is try to put a different spin on a conversation around data. And so what I'm going to try to do is, I know you look at it in front of the screens, and I'm going to try to use the pointer over here. But we're starting to draw in data that goes with the initiatives. And though we started off last year going through a process to identify a number of initiatives, they're all starting to blend together. So what I'm hoping to be able to do tonight is very briefly share not only what we're doing with the measurables and how we stand, a look at multiple measurables and initiatives within one set of data, and then look at a new initiative and some data that's coming out and what it says about how we're doing in the year of implementation. So a quick review. This is the year of implementation. We had a number of initiatives, 18 in total, some large, some small. But in order for it to really work, we have to implement what we said we would, and then we have to measure progress and make adjustments. So last week I presented to the board this general conceptual flow chart of a multiple measurable areas. So you have in the, I'm going to make up a bunch of colors here. I'm going to say mauve. Are the board adopted strategic plan measurables, first grade, fourth grade, eighth grade, and graduate college and career ready. In the light blue that runs horizontal, those are some areas that we need to identify or bring to the district. And then we have in the Cal colors some of the measurables that we have now, the map results, compass learning, and units of study as we start to gather data. And then in the gold, you have national ranking measures that will be applied to the high school where we can grab data. Ultimately, though, we need to look at each of these areas, and we should be able to communicate simply to the community how we're progressing or how our kids are doing, but also be able to have a more in-depth conversation about what the data is telling us and how things are working. So if you take a look, this is measurable number 1. On the left-hand side, you have where the kids need to be at the end of the year. The second teal color, that's my color of the moment, is where they need to be mid-year. And then you can see first blush, spring of 2014, or I'm sorry, fall of 2014, how our kids did. So you can take a look at that and say, you know, for first graders, they're going to jump 25, 30 RIT score points, that they should be able to, all of our averages at our school site should be able to meet that mid-year norm, and certainly the end of the year norm. The second one is our fourth grade. All students will read at grade level in fourth grade, and ultimately when we bring in a writing system, we'll have some data on that. But again, you take a look at it, and you have on the left, you have the end of the year RIT score, you have the mid-year RIT score, and where the schools came in right here in the first couple of months of school. These are all based on our MAP data. Then the 8th grade, you have the end of the year national norm. This is tied to algebra. You have the old system, which was CST, and the number that we've identified to be at grade level. And then you have the kids who are taking at the school sites in 8th grade math, how they're performing. And so even though the bars fluctuate greatly, and you take a look, our kids are all within range of where they need to be mid-year and at the end of the year. So what we could produce for the community, and what I want to start an ongoing conversation with the board is what is the data that we want to put in to say this is what we said we would do. These 3 measures here tell, based on our MAP score, exactly what we're doing on MAP with the measurables from the strategic plan. This is another look. So you have K through 8 look. The blue on the left is what the kids scored in fall, and the greenish color is the end of the year goal. And that's for reading. If you take a look at that, that gives an indication to all of us that our kids have started off the year strong. It's probably an indicator that there wasn't summer backslide, because if there was, those numbers would have dropped. And it says that we should be able to meet in all grade levels in reading the MAP national norm number for the end of the year, which also is an indicator that we should be able to do it in mid-year. The same thing with math. If you take a look, the blue line represents where we're at now, the green line where we need to be, and our kids on average are scoring very high at the beginning of the school year. Another indicator. Summer backslide is a major, major issue. So we've started off the year with our MAP score doing well. Now, don't throw anything when you see the next slide. Oh, no, I'm sorry. That was an anticipation thing. I got this thing. The other thing in our strategic plan is what are we doing in our focus areas? You can see very clearly that our low-income students, our English learners, our Hispanic students, and our African-American students are scoring slightly lower in reading in the first grade than other subgroups. It was an area that the board identified in our strategic plan. It said we needed to focus on and start asking the question, why these groups consistently score lower than other subgroups. The same points pretty much show up in reading in the fourth grade. And I want to point out in particular, keep an eye on the EL scores, because I'm going to use attendance and go back and make a point later. So the third one was 8th grade, and again you see a particular subgroup scoring lower than other subgroups. So we do need to have a conversation. The way we're building our units of study, and again this is going to be a 2 to 3 year process, there has to be strategic support. There's core instruction, and then there's individualized focus on kids' needs. One data point can say that in particular subgroups, we need to be aware of what we're doing during strategic support. Whether it's an academic issue or a reading issue or whatever, we need to have those conversations. That's the purpose of the board's commitment to teacher collaboration time. So this was the one I said don't throw anything. Now this is a very complicated slide, but it says a lot. What you have is an apples to orange year-to-year comparison. So if you take a look at the fall math scores in 2013-14, that's the blue bars, starting in first grade and looking as it progresses up, you can see a significant growth both in math and in reading from year to year. Different group of kids, but significant growth. So what does that tell us? That tells us that one thing, the kids are used to the computer adaptive test. So that's good news for us on two levels. One, this year in spring, they're taking a computer adaptive test called SBAC. We know we've prepared our kids in a model that can help them. And we knew going in that MAP was similar to what SBAC, that part of SBAC would be. The second thing is you have huge different shift in both math and reading. So there has to be some conversation around why is this year's group of kids, apples to oranges, performing better than last year's kids. Again, another purpose for collaboration time. Now here's where it gets a little bit more tricky. If you look diagonally starting in first grade and you go diagonally down, you can follow the same group of kids, oranges to oranges or apples to apples. So in first grade, here, fall of 2013, if you follow this group of kids, they jumped significantly, 155 to 194, 177 to 203. So in a slide like this, which is very visually, possibly overstimulating, you have a lot of information. Now, that wouldn't be something you handed to somebody and say, figure it out, but this is another piece of data that tells us what's going on in our district in this huge transition era. The MAP scores, which is a standard, a system, is saying that our kids are doing really well and did better this year than last year. I'm not going to go through all of the schools, but we have data like this for each group. But this is how we can break down just simply the MAP data and all the information that comes out to draw conversations for sites, grade level teams, and the district. So now I want to talk about Compass. Compass is a commitment of our district and from our board about a strategic support that's technology-based. So, excuse me. The difference between just talking about MAP results and Compass is Compass encapsulates a number of different initiatives. This board committed to the purchase of over 1,000 Chromebooks to be distributed equally out amongst our school sites' classrooms, approximately 8 per classroom. In order for Compass to work, you have to have 8 per classroom, or kids have to have access to the use of those computers. You also have to have MAP scores because it talks to Compass. So every student's individualized needs within Compass are started because they have a MAP score that they took. So that's 3 initiatives all tied together in one. So the first thing we have to take a look at is how are we doing using it? We're about a month really into this system, and I won't go through all of this, but I want to take a focus at a couple of different areas. Number one, you can see that the number of students versus the number of students reported is about a 50% drop. So that tells the superintendent, okay, 1 month into it, we have some usage issues. It opens the door for a conversation. Why is it that a number of kids appear not to be on the program? It could be, I know what some of the answers are, it could be that in individualized classrooms there's some issues. It could be that the revamping of the use of the Chromebooks hasn't completely taken hold. So the original way the Chromebooks rolled out at school sites was not the way we're asking that they be used now. The Chromebooks have to be used for blended learning opportunities. The Chromebooks have to be used for whole class things like a MAP test. And they're also to be used in particular as a mini lab. 8 students on a computer working on something like Compass or a teacher-directed assignment where the kids are working on the computers while the teacher has opportunities with the other groups to do independent work or small group instruction. That's part of the shift of what we're doing. What this tells me, not in an angry way, is we have to have a conversation about how are our kids getting access to Compass, and if we provided over 1,000 computers, what's not working with the system that's created? And then we empowers our principals to work with their staffs to work it out. So we're doing really well in 1 month into it, but we also have an area for a conversation. Data is very powerful. Doesn't lie. It tells us that the kids in the system, about half of them are using it. The other number that's really important to us is this one right here. What this says is it marries Compass back to MAP. It says that if the students are performing at 80% or higher, that it is a predictor that their MAP RIT scores will go up at the mid-year point and they will meet the mark both mid-year and at the end of the year. So just 2 data points within this for the discussion is we have 3 major initiatives tied to this one sheet of data, and it says we have to increase our usage, that for the most part K through 8, our students who are in the program are showing that they're going to make the mark both mid-year and at the end of the year. So this is what I want to start to do to tie our data to our initiatives, is saying, in terms of usage, this is where we stand. In terms of student progress, we need more time in the program to say how the kids are doing. So my last slide is this, is I want to point out attendance, because one of the single greatest contributing factors to student performance is attendance. So our district, and I'm going to squint, but our district attendance rate is 97%. Our special day class attendance is 95%. This is the one I want everybody to really focus in on. Our EL population attendance is 98%. And our TK percentage is a little bit like 90, I think that says 95%. 98% attendance rate by our EL students. So I'm going to go back and I want to take a look at something. Look at the EL score in math. Look at the EL score in reading for 4th grade. Look at the EL score in 1st grade reading. It says that the typical thing in a high poverty district with a high numbers of EL students is attendance is one of the reasons that's a contributing factor to the low performance. But in our district, we got 98% attendance, and we still have a blip, especially 4th grade in reading and 8th grade in math, that something's not working. So that is a real data-based instructional discussion that we need to have, which is if the kids are in class, what is not working and what is working. That's how we're building the units of study, is a dialogue going on with each grade level team, not just the design team, but all the teachers about what worked and what didn't work. And then we can go back and look at a gross, large district scale score like that and look at attendance and other factors and say, in this case, our EL kids are showing up. What do we need to do differently to help their performance? So that's my presentation tonight. It's really just a general thing. What I'm looking for feedback from the board is, and for a discussion at a next board meeting, is what kind of data from your perspective do we need to give to the community? Now, I can produce these bar graphs and line graphs all over the place, but we really need to think about what is the community looking for in terms of addressing the original thing, which is we should be able to have a one-stop shop. If I want to know how our kids are doing, I want to know we should be able to click on this, it brings up a link, and we see the data. And so we are not anywhere close to being fulfilled in all this, but we're starting to get real data. We have a year-to-year comparison with MAP. We have measurables that we have real data to substantiate how we're doing. And now we're looking at multiple data points like attendance and our EL scores to say, okay, what in here do we need to produce for our community, for our teachers, and for our school sites to make sure that all kids have the opportunities that we want them to have. And with that, that is my presentation this evening.
Okay, so I'm thinking about someone from the public who's not used to, so many charts, and this can be a little overwhelming.
Correct.
Okay. I think we need to put this data out there in more than one format. The charts and maybe a summary, a verbal summary, because you have graphic people and you have verbal people. So maybe both formats, just off the top of my head.
I'm just going to add that providing data without context isn't going to help very much. And the biggest thing I think people are going to look at is we're comparing us to us, but what does that really mean? The old test, good, bad, or indifferent, you always had a comparison of this district did this compared to this other district did that. And without that kind of information, all you can really do is report things, growth. We had a goal, we reached our goal. The first thing I look at when I see some of those numbers is we set low goals. Let's aim higher, because if we're only 3 points away at the very beginning of the year, we needed to adjust that goal. But without the context of this is why we set this goal, this is what this number means, this is how this number compares to what other people are doing, I don't know how you can digest that without sitting down and having an hour-long conversation about what all of this stuff is. So, and we're not going to have that for a while, right? I mean, you're going to take us back next year, at the end of the next calendar year,
Right.
And we won't have that information available until then. So,
And how meaningful will the first set
and
of those
exactly, I
lectures
mean, you got a whole bunch of other factors.
Everything worked out. It's
You
gonna
know,
take
and
years before
we're
that's
working with these
reliable.
computers where other districts aren't working with those computers. So it's a whole lot of other things. I really do think we need to point to what is a 211, what does it mean? whether you tie that to old
What I mean
stuff,
by summary.
it's got to, what does a 211 mean?
So maybe it's getting information out there as we work with our community on this year's LCAP. What does the community need to see to give us input for the LCAP?
So I would just say, whatever we decide in whatever process, whatever form it takes, I would advise to go slowly, maybe one item at a time, and let people digest it and get used to the whole idea of having to do some research for themselves to find out what's happening now. Let people have a chance to, give their feedback, and then, regroup and see what went well, what didn't go well, but really take it very slowly, very carefully, very methodically.
How are you planning on providing access? Are you going to have it available through the website?
Yeah, so all of this feedback is part of the challenge, which is if we put it out there and it's just a graph and it doesn't have context, it won't work. But yes, that's one point. One of the things we've really been talking about is doing short presentations using the technology that we broadcast this with. Infomercials is the word I'm thinking is take a particular thing and break it all down. And so that was born out of some of the parent workshops we did, and you start to look at them and you start to think, wow, we can take a person and talk and put a piece of data up or put a video clip.
Like a webcast.
Yeah, so we're going to use this as one of the vehicles. But when you get into like that, those very complicated slides with all that information, I mean, it's a turnoff to a lot of people because it's, well, where am I supposed to start with this? So I just wanted to present some of the information that we have, and then start a conversation about what do we really need to do to give the community the information that it needs, and me just pound out a bunch of information because that's going to be as effective as people understand the context.
I do agree with you got to go slow. I think that it needs to be a crawl, walk, run presentation. You're going to have to because this is new for everyone, and go slow.
To piggyback off what Michaela said, though, if you set those presentations up, today we're going to focus on math in the upper grades, and you're just having a 5-minute conversation about 6th, 7th, and 8th grade math scores. If you can set something up in that kind of context, yes, it's going to take a little bit more time to explain it, but you're providing much more meaningful data to the people, and that, I think, is going to be the biggest issue, because again, I have whatever working knowledge I have of that stuff from coming to all of these meetings and all of the discussions we've had. As a parent, if you just put that graph in front of me, I'd have no idea what that means. And to provide that opportunity, the infomercial thing is a great idea.
Yeah,
if you just do a quick little 5-minute, 10-minute hit on here's this is what we're working on, and then, but don't leave it there. And here's what we're doing next. Here's what we're focusing on. Here are the steps we're taking to improve and to continue to improve, because while we met the goal mid-year, we still have another goal. And to provide that, because that's, in the end, that's what parents want to know. Their kids are being challenged, and what that challenge looks like, and what it's going to look like when they're successful.
And I'd like to add, I do like the idea of a little infomercial that says, here's what we're doing, here's a summary. But I think most parents are more interested in what their own child is doing. We know we are the highest performing school district in San Joaquin County. But what does that mean for my child? And as long as that information is going home to parents, that's what's most important to them. I'm not saying that this stuff isn't important, and I do like the idea of, this little infomercial and that you get to go out and sell it. But I think as long as we keep giving the information to the parents, so we did map testing, and we send home those great reports. Here's what it means. Here's what your student did. Here's what they did last time. What does this growth mean? And I think that's why we're not getting a lot of questions, because we're sending that kind of information, and we need to continue doing that with other measures that we're using as well.
When our parents don't get the STAR report, that's what our parents want to see.
Yeah.
I get mine, I talk with my kids about it, that's what our parents want to see. And we have to get to that stage, whether it's us doing it or if the state finally does step up and do something 2 or 3 years down the road. But you're exactly right. Every parent wants their kids' STAR report. What are the measurables? What did they hit? Where were they in the band of exceeding or whatever the new topic's going to be? They want that individual individualized to their kid, absolutely.
And I think maybe having the infomercials that kind of explain what these reports that are going home to the parents mean,
Yeah.
you know, what this number means and how where your child went from the beginning of the year to the middle of the year to the end of the year, and how all that's, because a lot of those reports come home and the parents look and say, oh, that's great. What the heck does it mean?
Well, that's why I think if we approach it in a webcast where we're going to educate, we're going to provide a lesson in how to dissect the data, I think, you know, almost education on how to understand these numbers. I think that's kind of a way that people would appreciate, you know, receiving it. Use the technology to our advantage.
Yeah, and there's not enough time in back to school night or any parent-teacher conference to get that to them, so that would be really
They need to
great.
be able to do it at their own pace. I agree.
And at back to school night, it's too early. They don't know what it looks like sometimes.
Well, parents
So-
we only get, 15, 20 minutes. That's just not enough time.
Yeah. No, I like this new section on the website. I can see it, you know? The January commercial from Dr. Nicholas.
There you go.
Our dashboard.
That's another idea. Okay, so that was the whole idea of the study session is I'm going to blast out a bunch of info, and then let's really talk about what we really what we really want the community to know. So thank you for the feedback.
I would say, when looking at where to start with what's most familiar to them. That's probably reading. I mean, if you had to pick one to start with.
Did you see today's article about Common Core and math? You should check out the Contra Costa Times. There was a huge article about how parents in California are distressed over the lack of math education. Going slower will mean our kids won't get a chance for calculus. And I don't know, I do have a feeling that within Common Core, a lot of parents have more questions about math.
Right.
But it also might mean a much bigger conversation too. I do think we need to have a big focus on math and Common Core at some point because it's misunderstood. And
Well-
quite honestly, the public's getting information from internet sources that are giving them half truths on purpose.
And that was anticipated because it's new and it's the unknown and
But
it's, yeah.
our opportunity to give them the real information of what
Right.
we are doing to help their kids and not what someone else says Common Core means to them.
If we're successful in doing that, it'll come down to there's a conversation about math application, getting the right answer, and math concepts, understanding what it means to get the right answer. And the missing piece has been math concepts, teaching those concepts. So we have a lot of work to do. I keep saying 2 to 3 years. That's just to get solid foundation and our feet on the ground. And then we'll start getting consistent test scores at the end of the year. But we have to have stuff in the middle. And we're starting with some of the initiatives to get real data to talk about. So I wanted to kind of give you an update on how we're looking at information that's coming in, but ultimately we have to have a conversation about how we explain what all this stuff means.
Well, and we have to invest in our website. That has to be the portal where people go for information because that's the biggest complaint that I hear is that we're not giving enough information. So having webcasts or infomercials or what do you want to call them, but having the information available for people to digest at their convenience is huge. At least that's what I'm hearing.
Okay.
Yes. There might be some, yes. And go Giants.
Where's she at? Okay, I want to compliment because I'm going to get to broadcast this throughout the community. Every time I see Brandy, she's wearing a Yankee shirt. I've been a gentleman, I think, every time. Tonight she's wearing Giants colors, and that's all I wanted to say.
Okay, so I forgot to bring this up during the board reports. Tomorrow, October 16th, is Spirit Day. Go Purple on October 16th to stand up against bullying. This is a nationwide effort that was started by an organization called GLAAD, Gays and Lesbians Against Defamation. And millions go purple on Spirit Day and is in a stand against bullying and to show their support for lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender youth. Observed annually since 2010, individuals, schools, organizations, corporations, and public figures wear purple, which symbolizes spirit on the rainbow flag.
That's tomorrow?
That's tomorrow.
And I wanted to mention that I'm wearing my pink tie in celebration of Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and I've made my donation, and I hope everyone else has as well.
On to item 13, calendar. Wednesday, October 29th is the San Joaquin County Board Association Dinner in Stockton. And Wednesday, November 5th is the next regularly scheduled governing board meeting. And with that, Shane?
I move we adjourn to closed session.
All in favor?
Aye.
We are now adjourned to closed session. Thank you to all of you who came this evening.